Welcome to the ADNA Presents. This is Roy Samuelson. Darian Rodriguez Heyman has spent over 2 decades in the business of helping organizations do more good with less friction. He's launched some of the most widely attended nonprofit gatherings in history. He's co-founded conference series on social media and gender smart investing, and written or edited books on fundraising, nonprofit management, and most recently, AI for nonprofits. His consultancy, Helping People Help, works at the intersection of mission, technology, and sustainable impact. What drew me to this conversation is something I noticed when I learned about his work. The people he serves are often trying to do the right thing, but with limited resources in systems that weren't designed with them in mind. That tension lives in audio description too. So today I want to explore where those worlds might overlap and where they might push each other. Darian, welcome to the ADNA Presents.
Thanks for having me, Roy. Glad to be here.
When you think about organizations, when they say that they care about inclusion, what's going to separate the ones who genuinely mean it from the ones who are performing it?
I think it's action instead of words is the punchline there. In general, whatever cause you may be focused on, if it's in a nonprofit umbrella, there's usually some type of call for equity or for opportunity and access for people that lack access, whether that's people of color or low-income folks or women or people from a certain part of the world. So there's usually an effort to sort of equalize and level the playing field. And there's a lot of groups out there that talk about wanting a just and thriving and sustainable and equitable world and aren't necessarily taking actions to bring that world about. And so it's this real premise that it is incumbent upon us, that we are the leaders, the heroes and the sheroes that we've been waiting for. And if we're serious about building this better world, we got to get to work. And it's the people that are actively working to build that world that we all know is possible that are my clients and my tribe. And so my work in the world is really helping them be more effective, helping them add a hero, whether it's to funds raised or clients served, and really addressing and knocking down the barriers that are impeding their impact. And I would say, your intro was spot on so many levels. And the one thing I would respectfully push back on is it's not the case that they usually are facing barriers or lack access. It is almost by design. And so it is every single client with whom I worked. None of them have too much money or too many staff or are positioned to easily tackle their mission. On the contrary, by design, the nonprofit sector and philanthropy by an extension is always under-resourced and understaffed. And we are always trying to tackle something huge like homelessness or climate change or racial justice that is almost asymptotic in its nature, where it's sort of something to strive toward. And the more money that these organizations have, the more they can impact. And we're trying to identify the ones that have a proven track record of being able to responsibly steward those dollars and usher in the kind of impact that their donors and funders want to see. And so my work is really helping them figure out how to do that, but also helping them tell that story and raise the funds needed to provide the ball bearings for their mission.
I'd love to do a follow-up. You talked about the aspirational aspect, and I think about when that striving towards something hits a barrier, that's what you and your organization are helping remove. There's also an aspect of good intentions that people can bring assumptions to what they need to do when it comes to getting that mission accomplished, getting that aspirational goal achieved. Can you talk a little bit more about that in the context of your answer?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I would say is that it is shockingly consistent, the patterns that you see. I started my work and my career out in the business world where I had a startup and co-founded one of the first digital ad agencies, and that was a great experience. But in general, in the business world, even though when we got started, the term startup didn't really exist yet, there was still an idea of a business plan. And you would essentially get laughed out of the room if you tried to pitch an investor on a business idea and either you didn't have a plan or that plan failed to include a competitive analysis and who else is out there and how are we different. On the flip side, unfortunately, I've yet to see a nonprofit business plan. Like nobody does their homework before launching an organization. That is absolutely the norm. And, people have this spear through the chest moment. Their mom gets sick or they see a hurt animal or whatever it is, and they want to rush out and be part of the solution, which is awesome. And yet, the way I heard former President Clinton say it is we need to seek first to collaborate and only then to lead. And so rather than rushing out and starting a new nonprofit, of which there's already 2 million out there in this country, ideally the first step is looking at who else is out there trying to tackle this problem and seeing how you can support their work. And only after you've done that, if there's still a gap that you're identifying, then great, you could set up a new organization, ideally through something called a fiscal sponsor. So you're not even setting up a new nonprofit and then going from there. And that unfortunately doesn't happen. The other thing that leads to, aside from making the same mistakes in the same order very reliably, is that there's this entire ecosystem of support organizations that are usually called capacity builders or technical assistance providers or management support organizations. But the punchline is these are nonprofits that exist to, all they do is support other nonprofits with fundraising, with marketing, with technology, with boards, you name it, and nobody knows about them. And so a big part of my career has been connecting those dots so people know that what resources are out there for them, and also really trying to cut through the clutter. Because, one of the things I realized after I did a big listening tour when I first took the reins at Craigslist Foundation and started this work almost 30 years ago, was aside from the fact that everybody's making the same mistakes in the same order and they're not aware of these support resources, the big other theme that I heard is basically, in short, enough with the inspiration. We're already inspired. That's why we're doing this work. We don't need more big abstract concepts and ideas and philosophies. What we need are tactical, practical tips and tools. Do this, don't do that. Here's how to kind of content. And that's basically become my life's work through conferences, through books, through keynotes and other thought leadership work, and through my consulting practice has been, sharing that owner's manual with the mission-led leaders that are running foundations or nonprofits or looking to start those, or companies launching a corporate foundation, and trying to do it in a way where, in short, Roy, we can make change irresistible instead of it being a sacrifice. And, we got to suck it up and tighten the belt in order to do the right thing. What does it look like for the company to do even better because of its philanthropic purpose and work? And that's been a lot of the work I've done has been sort of catalytic philanthropy, where not only can we use this to fuel the success of the business, or, in the case of a foundation or a nonprofit, we can put $25 million into a pot to address racial equity in a town like Dayton, Ohio, but then unlock another $200 million of additional funding because, we have a special voice as a funder. And so that opportunity to parlay some resources and kind of add a zero and have exponentially more impact is a big part of the work I do in the world. And there's a lot of opportunities there.
Oh, it's so great. And I imagine that those companies that do get to that point, when they do take advantage of the connected resources that you offer and your organization offers, that I imagine being in a car when I first learned how to drive a stick, and it's like, I want to drive and I gun the accelerator, and it's like, you gotta put it in gear first. And I think about what you're talking about feels like putting it in gear in the sense of not only strategy, but also, hey, let's see what's already out there and putting it together. When I think about you mentioning your book, that can probably only be described as an owner's manual of kind, that when it comes to AI for nonprofits, what I'd like to ask you about is not the book, because I could read that online. What are you actually seeing in practice? How is the mission-led organization use that tool or other tools? And I don't want to ask where they're getting it wrong, because I think you've already answered it. But if there's anything you'd like to expand on that part, let's stick with the positive. How are they using the tools?
I mean, unfortunately, they're not. So I'll say a bit more about that, but let me just first quickly respond to the car metaphor you were using. And I think rather than like putting it into gear, I think the current paradigm is we can only go backwards, and there's only the option of going in reverse, and any gas we want to put into that is going to take us away from our goal as a company, as a funder. And there's a forward gear. In fact, there's several. And when you think about it that way, it doesn't have to happen at the expense of the goal. It can in fact advance it, whether that's, corporate revenues, whether that's impact for a foundation or a nonprofit. And so that's what I mean by making change irresistible. And I think to answer your question about AI, Roy, it is kind of, I was dumbfounded when I first discovered this, because On one hand, the interest level around AI for good is off the charts. My book was not only a bestseller in AI and nonprofit categories and office automation, even it hit top 10 in overall business and finance. Like people are really interested in the AI conversation, especially in the nonprofit sector, but in society at large. And, the data shows that 92% of nonprofits today are using AI in some capacity. But then what I didn't realize at the time when the book came out, but I've since had this rude awakening, is if you look at nonprofits in particular, even though over 90% are using AI in some capacity, under 10% are approaching it with a strategic organizational lens. So it's kind of this wild west where all the value is getting absorbed by two or three people in any given organization who are the resident AI folks. And if I'm at a foundation or a nonprofit or mission-led business and someone asks about AI or has an idea, oh, go talk to Bob, go chat with Jane. But like we have no strategy or policy. So there's this huge disconnect between the intense interest level, the response to the book or the keynote at the conferences or whatever it might be, and then the lack of follow through at the organizational level. And I've come to recognize that I think there's really two reasons for that. And again, the punchline here is to answer your question, nonprofits are not really taking advantage of AI right now. Individuals are using it to do some of their work, but as organizations, we're not. And I think the reason is twofold. Number one is that basically people are freaked out. And this is true for the world and society in general, but it's equally true for nonprofits, and even more so potentially, which is that if you look at the data, people are more worried than excited about the AI powered future. And that's not surprising. We're dealing in a world where, wealth and power is getting increasingly concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. And nonprofits by design are mission-led organizations. They're values-driven. And so if you expect people to just sort of park their concerns and fears, whether it's about data security or staying human-centered or hallucinations or bias or environmental impact or job loss, and just say like, never mind that, what can the tool do for us? Like, that's not how nonprofit leaders work. We're bringing our full selves to this work. And so I think we need to meet people where they are. And right now, although there's a lot happening right in the AI for good conversation, we are just skipping over all of the very valid fears and concerns that are inhibiting responsible adoption. And I think we need to be better about tackling that stuff directly and transparently and talking about what we do know, what we don't know, strategies for mitigation, dispelling misinformation, whatever it might be. And so that's one half of the coin, is directly addressing those fears and concerns. But the other half of the coin is so much of the mantra around AI and why people need to adopt it is this weird message that like, you're behind and you need to adopt this tool because everybody else is doing it and you're behind. And that's like the Brooklyn Bridge concept. Like, just because other people might be doing it, like, so what? The world is kind of falling apart. Nonprofits in general have almost a perfect storm of downward pressure on revenue and income, upward pressure on the services and demand for what they do. So like they're freaking out, they're busy. It's kind of an existential crisis in some ways where we're migrating from, an age of planning where we can make some plans to the era of navigation where we need more resilient, responsive organizations because the amount of turbulence is just going off the charts. And in order to get through to nonprofits and leaders in general, I think we need to talk to them in today's terms about what can AI do for me today? Never mind curing cancer or solving climate change a generation from now. Like, I've got stuff to do. I've got mouths to feed or kids to teach how to read or whatever it may be. Can AI help me raise more money, reach more people, drive down costs and operate more efficiently, enhance our programs or better evaluate those or streamline back office operations? Those are all pressing needs that nonprofits have today, and AI can help. And that's the framing that we need to reach people at, is how we can help them help others immediately, not what's on the other side of the rainbow. And my sense is when we do those two things, when we tackle those fears and concerns, when we talk about AI as a tool that can help leaders today, then they get open to the possibilities of, okay, where do we want to point that thing? What would it look like? How do we ensure it's in line with our values? And all those secondary, critical, very foundational conversations. But people aren't even able to have those until you have those first two.
Those 2 points that you made about the freak out and also what can we do today, I think about on the accessibility side that a lot of outreach that has happened, there is that trepidation of, I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to violate something. I don't want to get in trouble. You talk about addressing the fears and concerns of AI. You talk about being more immediate with what AI can do. Those two things seem directly related to getting an organization or a leader in an organization on board by saying, hey, we're going to work together on this. Let's talk. That talking itself has to get to a point of, you're okay to talk now. This is a place where we can talk. I don't know if I'm making an assumption or not. Does that resonate with you, or am I off a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's less about an overarching fear of like getting it wrong, although that is at play. But I think the more pressing concern is the need to demystify the technology, is like the tactical, how the hell do I get these robots to work for me? Everybody's talking about like digital intern. Like, what? I'm going on to ChatGPT and how's that going to help me teach blind people to read or something? Like, so it's connecting those dots. And ultimately the exciting thing of where the technology is heading, Roy, is that we're getting pretty close to the point where you can build the bridge backwards. You don't need to know how to code or all the details. You just need to know where you want to head. And if you understand the needs of your community, if you're working on accessibility for blind and low vision audiences, great. And you don't need to have all the answers. You just need to know where you're going. You need to have a sense of what your community needs. And yes, once you address those sort of primary, like primer coat level fears and concerns, and what can the tool do for us, then we can start looking at, do we need to translate this book from English Braille into other languages? Or are there other accessibility features? I mean, frankly, the accessibility space is kind of the Wild West. Like I interviewed 57 different people for the book on all different aspects of using AI for fundraising, for marketing, for programs in back office. And I asked around, I could not find an accessibility expert that could speak in the past tense about what they had used AI to do, what they had learned, and how it could help other nonprofits. So this is like bleeding edge stuff. There are groups out there that are starting to make a dent to it, but there are a lot of use cases and applications here that I think groups, leading work around accessibility for these communities are really well positioned to capitalize on. And it's also natural you're not going to get it perfect, right? Like and when we talk about translation, whether that's into different versions of Braille or different languages, the technology at its core is essentially word salad. So, when you Google something and it guesses the next word that's going to be in that phrase, that is what's under the hood for all of natural language processing and machine learning, is just throwing a huge amount of data at these computers and allowing them to find the patterns. It doesn't actually really know the stuff. It's guessing what they think you want to hear. And that as a result, leads to these hallucinations, these errors where I liken today's AI models to the drunk frat boy at the bar that's equally confident what he's saying, whether it's completely fabricated or actually true, and he doesn't know the difference. So knowing that, if I hit a button and translate my website from English to Swahili, there's going to be some mistakes. And depending upon how important this stuff is, if it's my bookkeeping and accounting information, zero tolerance. If it's, healthcare records, like really secure and zero tolerance. But if it's, trying to translate something for a monolinguistic community that if we get it close enough and they get the concepts, that's good enough, great. And then again, we can open up the conversation with our community to say, we don't have a fluent Swahili speaker who can double check if they got it exactly right. So please let us know, or what are we getting wrong? Or we're doing the best we can with the tools we have available to serve you. And there are a lot of blind and low vision people out there, and we'd love to serve more of them, but we're a small nonprofit. And so we're going to use these tools, and we need you to tell us if they're effective and functional or if they're not. And maybe we have to try and fail with a couple different platforms. And that's okay, as long as we're transparent with the community that we serve. They want to be our partners in this work. They recognize and appreciate the good work that we're doing, and they will gladly pipe up and let us know when we get it wrong. And if we can approach that conversation with humility, I think there's a lot that is possible in terms of responsibly deploying these technologies in a way that directly benefits the people we're here to serve.
There's something about that all or nothing thinking, that there is that space in certain aspects. Like you said, there's certain areas where you need to be really careful. That permission to fail in those certain cases and the visibility about that. seems to be a collaboration. That is a relationship. There's a symbiotic connection there. And I got to say, when I think about using any prompt engineering for the AIs, I consider it, I've hired a college intern, and every time I prompt, I'm giving them a shot of alcohol. And after I prompt 4 or 5 times, they're out of commission. It gets worse and worse. That's old school AI, but I delighted in hearing your example about the college age.
It's really interesting times. I do think some of these problems are going to get solved, and it almost gets more complicated at that point. Like when you can hand the robots the keys and trust them to follow through on stuff, what becomes possible then, right? Like you probably have heard about agentic AI, and a lot of people throw that term around. A lot of people don't know what it means, but basically what's around the corner, you use AI in like a one and done fashion. Like you Google something, you get an answer and you're done. Maybe you find it a little bit, but it's all like call and response. We are right around the corner from you telling the robots, hey, next time Beyonce's in town and you can get me front row seats for under $500, here's my credit card info, go ahead and buy it. That's coming soon. And it really starts to open up some huge opportunities and many, many implications on a social justice level, on a bias level, and we're not there yet because we can't trust the robots, right? And we can't hand them the keys, but that's coming pretty soon. The other thing, though, that I think is really important for your listeners, like just to get tactical for a quick second, because you just mentioned the idea of prompt engineering and like speaking AI is the way I think of it. And I actually created a cheat sheet for this, which people can find at helpingpeoplehelp.com, when they read about me on the website and stuff. So we created a cheat sheet for nonprofits through AI for Nonprofits. And the punchline is there's a right way to speak AI, whether you're looking for instructions of how to fundraise more money for your nonprofit, or you just want a, recipe for dinner tonight based on what's in the fridge, whatever it is that you're asking for. If you think about, your hand has 5 fingers, there are 5 ingredients that if you integrate into your chat, when you query anything, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or any other platform, there's a right way to ask for whatever it is you need. And the first thing, if you're going to rub the magic genie lamp and ask for something, you may as well make that genie the exact right person with whom you'd like to speak. So if you are telling it you are a world-class fundraiser with experience in the nonprofit sector and a focus on accessibility for blind and low vision populations, and you have raised millions of dollars for grassroots nonprofits focused on that cause. Right? First sentence is like, who do I want to talk to that would be the exact right person? Then it's like, what do I want? Right? I would like your help drafting a grant application for this foundation, telling it exactly what the goal is. From there, it's what is the tone? Is this a professional tone? Is it youthful and energetic and vibrant? Is it more corporate and buttoned down? Right? The fourth piece is what's the output? Am I looking for you to write up a 5-page report? Is this a 1-paragraph summary, 3 bullet points, whatever it may be? And then finally, Roy, and probably the single greatest tip that I got when I interviewed those 57 people is the difference between what's called a 0-shot and a multi-shot prompt, which quite simply just means give it an example of, hey, I wrote one of these myself before, and here's where I landed. Use this as a point of reference. Roy's got such an incredible and accomplished background. How am I ever going to write a 1-paragraph bio for him? Well, here's what I did for Darian's bio. Use that as a point of reference. And that alone is going to get you much better results, especially when you add in some more intermediate or advanced tips, like not just one and done and ask for something and you're finished, but give it feedback and refine its answers to get it from a C- to a B+. Another thing is sort of iterate for excellence. And instead of asking it for whatever you need, maybe ask it for like 10 bullet point initial suggestions. And, oh, I really like these 3, give me 5 more of those. Land on kind of the concept or the premise, and then ask it for that 1-paragraph description. And I think those kinds of tips where you view AI as a thought partner and it's more of a conversation and a dialogue versus a transaction that's like you press a button and you're done. And then probably the final tip, and arguably the most important thing, is you always need a human in the loop. Again, you cannot hand the robots the keys at this point and trust their work. You need to take responsibility for that work if you're going to share it. And the last thing you should ever do, especially in a high value form like an email to a donor is just copy and paste straight out of AI. That is a recipe for disaster. And you always need to double check AI's work. Ideally, you think of it as an AI sandwich where you come in on the front end, you tell the robot what you need, they do what they're going to do, and then you double check their work, and you're the one sending it out the door. You're the executive chef in the kitchen, and AI can be a sous chef, right? Or even a prep cook, but you're not empowering it to just send stuff out the door unchecked.
Beautiful. And I think about the implications of that trust that's being built in that relationship, that if there is that outreach in that example to someone, to have that human in the loop to catch the AI equivalent of a typo that can really hurt that relationship, that has a profound effect. I can't help but think about 2,000 more questions to ask you, but I would like to ask, what are you looking forward to this year that you could share with our audience? Something in the work that you're doing with helping people help or otherwise?
There's two big questions that I don't have answers to, and I'm looking forward to partnering with some smart and heart-led folks to come up with some answers. So number one is, what does it look like to train up the sector at scale to reach thousands of nonprofit and foundation leaders, help them understand how to responsibly deploy AI solutions? I did start a nonprofit called AI for Nonprofits, same name as the book. We have built a website that has a whole resource directory of AI for good tools at AI4np.org. And we also had a vision of a whole nationwide series of conferences. And we had free venues lined up in major cities around the country. And unfortunately, due to some of the current economic headwinds and some of the other challenges I mentioned, nonprofits just can't afford to pay. I had purposely not wanted to first start with going after foundations and getting sponsors and grants to do this thing. Wanted it to be self-sufficient. We put on a sold out event with Beth Kanter keynoting in Silicon Valley a couple months ago. It was really well received, but we had to cut the price in half because otherwise people couldn't attend. And so unfortunately, we're in a position where we need sponsors. We need foundations who believe in the power of AI to help support the sector, to partner with us to bring the series to, pretty much any major city around the country, because we've got all these free venues lined up. So that's kind of one thing I've been wondering about is, how do we find the right partners to really reach these thousands of leaders that need these solutions to better serve their community? And then the other one is, what would it look like to really mobilize the sector and get us to speak in one voice, the 2 million nonprofits and foundations out there, to really speak in one voice and serve it as the guardrails to ensure a responsible approach to AI adoption? I think what we're seeing out of DC and Capitol Hill is the federal government not only has zero interest in reining in AI or anything other than we got to beat China, they are actively undermining state level efforts to try to regulate AI. So it's like beyond laissez-faire, and it's all about this beat China mantra. And then if you look at industry, we're seeing a little bit of stuff out of Anthropic and other stuff, but they can't really be expected to self-regulate. And so nobody's really minding the store. And we are kind of at the precipice of hopefully unlocking this gorgeous and thriving and equitable future. And there's also like the Terminator option. And I don't think that's likely, but I think it's a non-zero chance. And I think we should have some guardrails in place. And I feel like the social sector, nonprofits and foundations have a unique role to play to sort of provide those guardrails and incentives for society. And I'd love to connect with people to explore what would it look like. I feel like I've got the right partners on, lined up. If we can figure out like what's on the other side of the rainbow, like talk about building the bridge backwards, what would that even look like to provide that counterbalance to a runaway AI? And I think that there's a role there for nonprofits and foundations to play. So those are kind of the two big things. But then beyond that, I'm also just happy anytime I do a keynote or write a book or a podcast like this, I always offer up a pro bono coaching session to any of the listeners or delegates in the audience. So if people want to reach out to me through helping people help, happy to give them 20 minutes of my time one-on-one and just kind of no strings attached, find out more about their work, where they're getting stuck, whether it's in accessibility or other causes, and just point them in the direction of best practices and free resources.
Oh, thanks so much for offering that. You shared the website helpingpeoplehelp.com/about to go to the prompt engineering cheat sheet that you mentioned. That's helpingpeoplehelp.com/about. and also the other website, ai4np.org. That's ai4np.org. A generous offer here. We've covered so much. You've given some great resources. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about yet that you'd love to share with our listeners?
Like I said, just if I can be of service to folks out there that are looking to build a better world, that's all the work that I do, whether they're on the foundation and the nonprofit side or even the corporate side around corporate philanthropy. And so, yeah, I'm at the service of your audience and happy to be helpful if folks are looking for like custom trainings. And, I'm very interested in the at scale stuff, but if they're looking for, a custom training for their organization or a keynote speaker at their annual conference or something like that, I do a lot of that work too. But ultimately, I just really want to thank everybody, not only on behalf of myself and even of you, but I want to thank your listeners on behalf of the thousands of people that they collectively serve every day. And I'm hoping they're leaving this talk not just inspired, but inspired to action and aware of some new best practices and resources that maybe they didn't know about before.
I love that you brought it back to action. That's the very first thing that we talked about. Thank you so much for this time. This is incredibly valuable, and I'm so thankful to have you on the podcast and have your insights shared with us. Thanks so much.
My pleasure, Roy.